Do I have to do anything here?
Nope.
Got it? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in about 1 minute here. There's just some last minute folks joining from the wait room here, and I will admit them all and then we'll get started. Great. So just so everyone knows, I recommend that you change the view to speaker view. If you go to the top right-hand corner of the Zoom window, and I'm sure everyone's probably already used to these meetings, but if you switch to speaker view, then it works a little bit better. So that would be my recommendation. Good evening, Julia Lafreniere and Indigenous Camperville Dunji WAG-Qaumajuq. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Julia Lafreniere. I'm the head of Indigenous Initiatives at the Winnipeg Art Gallery Qaumajuq. My family is from the Metis community of Camperville, which is located on Treaty 4 territory. And I'm a member of the MMF via the Southeast Region Stony Point Local, and also a proud member of the Infinity Women's Secretariat. I'd like to thank the Manitoba Métis Federation and the Infinity Women's Secretariat for their support for tonight's event and for all of the programs that are part of the Metis Kitchen Table Teachings series. Currently, we have 2 exhibitions by Métis artists at the WAG. We have Rosalie Favel's exhibition Family Legacy, and I'll just put that in the chat box here for you to have a look at your own leisure. Rosalie's exhibition is on until September 12th, so please come and visit and have a look. Admission to the WAG is free for all Indigenous people, and membership is also free. And then here is the link if you would like to become a member, and you get special benefits as becoming a member, as you can see at the link. So the other Métis artist that we're currently exhibiting is an artist named Tracy Charette Fair. Her exhibition is called Heartbeat of a Nation, Métis Women 250 Years, and it honors and celebrates Métis matriarchs. So here is a link to her exhibition. So the Metis Kitchen Table Teachings programming is tied to the themes of these exhibitions, which will run until November 2021. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge that this is typically the space where hosts or moderators would include a land acknowledgement. And personally, I support acknowledging the land that we all live on and work on. And I practice this every day and also when in ceremony. However, I don't support the current trend of land acknowledgements as I find them to be empty and performative. And I would rather organizations put their efforts into making real change institutionally. So I'm going to omit the land acknowledgement this evening. And if anyone would like to discuss this further with me, please feel free to send me an email. I'll put my email address here in the chat for everyone. Just to let you know, I'm sure you all know, it's Jennine Krauchi that's going to be speaking with us this evening. We're going to have room for a Q&A at the end at about 6:45. So feel free to wait for your questions until then, but Jennine has also said that she doesn't mind a little more conversational atmosphere if you have questions during her talk. So it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening. Jennine Krauchi is a Métis beadwork artist and designer. She creates clothing and does replica work for many organizations, including the Manitoba Museum, Parks Canada, the Canadian Museum of History, the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and other institutions across the world in Scotland, France, and the United States. She has also taught quill work and moccasin and mukluk making in schools and festivals in Canada and Europe. World-renowned Métis artist, Jennine Krauchi, I'm very grateful that she's agreed to come and speak with us this evening. So she'll take us through a journey of the history of the Métis, our ancestors, and the truly amazing rebirth of our art form known as beadwork. So welcome, Jennine Krauchi.
Thank you, Julia. That was I don't know who you were talking about there. That was a great introduction. Thank you so much for that. I can see a lot of names here that, that I recognize here and there. And I hope I don't bore anybody by the same stories that I might be telling tonight, but we should get started. And I am going to start first with, I'd like to talk a little bit about Tracy Fair, because I know David's here. And Tracy, we've had a chance in the last 6 months or so, maybe longer, to get to know Tracy. And we meet every Friday from noon till 2. And we have the opportunity through the Manitoba Museum also to get a chance to meet a lot of the different artists and people involved with the WAG. So I really want to support Tracy in her endeavor with the WAG, and hopefully one of us along the way will get one of those 250 bowls that she's planning to present and gift to some special people along the way. So anyway, I just wanted to just sort of put that in there for Tracy. And but what I'm going to start with first is, I guess, a little bit of the history. I think a lot of people know the history of our beadwork, of our Métis style. A lot of people think, maybe it started with the Grey Nuns teaching Indigenous women how to do silk embroidery. Well, I think it started a little bit, earlier than that. But, there was a combination of designs, French designs, that the nuns were, had taught some of the women with the silk embroidery. And you see it if you're going to St. Boniface Museum and you look in some of their archives, you'll look at some of the old embroidery patterns and you'll see a connection between our beadwork and then, of course, what we saw in nature. But before that, it was quill work that we were doing. And we were, it was a First Nations, work that they did for their outfits. It wasn't really in art practice. It was more of it was decorating their outfits, and their jackets, but it was done differently than, say, the Métis and their beadwork and what we did. We did it in a lot of cases, for decoration, to be identified as Métis people. And you see it, like I said, the combination of the two. The Manitoba Museum has a great collection of Métis beadwork. I know David here, David Heinrichs. Him and I and a couple of other people, we were just this past week, we were able to look at in some of the archives in London at the Royal, what was it, the Royal, it was the Royal Museum in Greenwich. And we were able to look at some of the old quill work that were done, and that was done by Métis women. That wasn't done by First Nations women. These pieces were done by Métis women, and we were able to look at them and study them. And I think that's that part of it is a really exciting thing, that we are able to visit some of these museums that we would never maybe be able to get a chance to see some of the collections that they have and be able to study them the way we were doing the other day. So that was a real treat to be able to do that, and a real connection to our work and the women that came before us. It was actually quite emotional. I really didn't think I would be as emotional as I was, but towards the end, it was really emotional to be able to meet these pieces. Like we said at the end, it's like they became friends. They became teachers, and it was, and bringing back some of our women and what they had done, and these beautiful pieces that they sat there, and I imagine them when I'm looking at the piece. I imagine them sitting there doing it, and thinking of their hands, and being able to, if we could only sit and watch them while they were doing it. But anyway, I'm getting maybe a little off track there, and a little bit more thinking about those pieces. Another thing, a lot of these pieces were never identified as the woman who did them. A lot of they're just, thinking about that earlier today, about talking about a lot of the pieces, and that they aren't identified. And all there is a number. And it's it could be, in a museum, but they've got to be numbered, of course, to, have an index and a file and everything else that goes along with it. But it's almost like they should be named. They should have a name at least, and not just a name like, oh, that's Métis, that's Cree, that's Ojibwe. It should be a little bit more personal, because those pieces were so personal that they did. All of us, I think, sitting here and talking here tonight, a lot of us do beadwork or something with our hands, and realize what a connection we have with those pieces, that they shouldn't just have a number. They should have more than that. So I'll sort of get away from that part of it and talk a little bit about my own life and growing up and having beadwork and being there was always beadwork around from the time that I can remember as a young girl. And I even have my jacket that I first wore when I was about 6 or 7 years old, maybe younger. And I actually have it right here, and I still have it. And this was my little jacket that I wore when I was a little girl. So I have been wearing beadwork for a long time, as you can tell. And I didn't make a real connection with it until probably the 90s. I did other things, but my family was always involved with beadwork and moccasins and making all of that. And I did learn how to do that as a young girl. But then, as you're growing up, there's a time when you think, okay, I'm going to go out and do my own thing. Well, I did that for a while, and it just came full circle and back to what I'm doing here. And it was maybe the opportunity to move from Brandon to Winnipeg and kind of start all over again in what I was going to do, because I was always sewing and all of that in Brandon, but it was mostly, custom orders as far as leathers and suedes, or I even did the wedding dress thing for a while. And then when I moved to Winnipeg, it was like starting all over again and trying to decide what direction I was going to go next. And it was like, it was always there. Why didn't I just get back into what I started out with as a young girl? And so that's what I did. I started in doing Indigenous clothing, and really getting to feel, knowing what it felt like for maybe some of the women from up north coming into Winnipeg to sell their wares. I never had to do that in Brandon, and I had to do it here. And that was probably one of the scariest things that I had to do at that time, was to take the stuff that I had made and go and try and see if somebody was going to like it and if they were going to buy it. And the first place I did that with was Four Winds. And it was Southwest, I believe, Southwest tribal. And it was mostly First Nations. The person I was with and had to sell my that would okay it or not was a fellow from Rolling River, and that started the whole thing of getting back into my my Métis roots. I always knew I was Métis. I grew up Métis. It was never denied. I was never, I grew up with very proud both parents. My mom is Métis and my dad was Dutch, but he really instilled in us that we keep our culture and we keep it going and we keep it alive. He loved our beadwork. He loved everything about the culture. So he was a big part in our lives to keep this work from dying. It's like, so that's kind of, I guess a little bit of how I, and like I said, from there, my mom was still doing a lot of beadwork. We would collaborate on things. She would do the beadwork and I would sew the jackets, and we did a lot of beaded jackets for whether it was the chiefs or just customers that came into Four Winds or any place that I had was selling things. So it sort of started there. And then I met a girl named Lorraine Freeman, and she was starting up an organization called the Métis Resource Center. And all she wanted was to have Métis people and Métis culture involved. And it was, the music, the genealogy, all of that. And she was looking for a person to demonstrate Métis beadwork. And I knew somebody that knew somebody else that knew, Lorraine down at the resource center. So I came into her office on Albert, and I said, well, I'm Métis and I can, do beadwork. I can teach it. I don't do it full time, but I could sit down and teach it. So she said, okay, come on in. And that started the whole beadwork thing for me. Because before that, I really didn't do much beadwork. I saw it being done a lot of the times because of my mom. But as far as sitting down and doing, so I started about 90, I would say about 95, 96, 1996, around that time period with Lorraine. And she was having a very difficult time to find at that time too, finding a Métis beater. There was very few, and I always talk about this. It was like at that time, we were lucky to have enough people to sit around a kitchen table of Métis beaters. That's how few there were at that time. And then like with her, it just sort of, everything kind of snowballed, and she kept that place going, and they had jigging and they had fiddle music and they had everything to do with Métis. But that, like I said, that was sort of the beginnings of my sort of my life with beadwork. And I started, and I started the same way as anybody else did, very slow. I was very slow at beadwork, and it was just sort of like, took my time. And but eventually you get your speed up, and and you do sort of you hit sort of like your top speed, and then that's it. You don't get any faster than that. But it was it was an interesting, and from then on it was an interesting journey to now. And everything along the way has been a learning experience for me. the museums and art galleries have been a wealth of information for me. I really needed to find out, and I really needed to know what the old beadwork was all about. And it's like in a lot of things, it's like music or anything. You have to know, and you should know about the things that came before us and the history of it, and the women that did these beautiful pieces that we see in museums. I have learned so much with those pieces. They become, and they do, and I'm not just saying that, but they do become a part of you. And it's like visiting an old friend. I had to do a pair of mitts for Parks Canada a few years back. That was silk embroidery. And so they said, okay, we want these ones here, these mitts, can you replicate these? Well, that's one thing about it. It's like you really can't replicate some of the old pieces. It's like it's almost, like you can tell these women have done this for years from the time they were little girls. But I said, okay, let's give it a try. So I did these little mitts, and they were on caribou, and they had silk ribbon. So I went through the whole process, and after it was like I did the little mitts, but it was like I thought beadwork was slow. This embroidery, silk embroidery, is even like more intense. It took me over a month to make those little mitts, and that was steady. I was working from morning till night, and then back and forth to visit them and to have a look, see what the next step was going to be. And then they were done. And I thought, I will never do another pair of those again. They were so labor intensive, and so, it was like it was like, oh boy. And then I think about 5 years after that, they asked me to make another pair, and I said, yeah, okay. But it was kind of like visiting an old friend again. And it was like spending time with them. And I was very fortunate to be able to have access to a lot of the archives and spend time alone with these pieces, because I think it's really important to spend alone time with them and to really get to know them, because you're looking at them inside and out, and you're able to touch them. Sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, you can touch them without any gloves. So, and that's such a treat. But yeah, it is really, I don't even know how to explain it. It is really something that I think every beader should experience. Pick out one piece that you really, really like in some of the museum collections, and just spend time with them. Try and replicate it. Try and source out the materials that were being used at a certain time. But it will give you, it'll give you much more of a sort of a connection to your culture. It'll bring those pieces out to be enjoyed, to be, we shouldn't just always have them sitting in the back room somewhere in a drawer. They should come out. They should see us. They should be a part of us, especially as Métis or Indigenous people. They're important, and we should start naming them. Even if they don't have a name, we should start naming them rather than just having numbers. So that's, maybe I probably sound like I'm rambling, but once I get on something, it's kind of like it's hard to get off that. But yeah, it's that led, like I said, it led me to what I do now. And I know there's beaters out there, and it's like, and I guess also too, it's like, I think it's really important that we support one another. That, like tonight, I'm wearing Lisa Shepherd's scarf. Each and every one of us we do individual pieces. They are ours. They belong to you. They belong to, you know, the person that does it. And I think we should acknowledge one another for that. And I think we should really support one another with our beadwork. You know, there's room for everybody to be out there doing it and appreciate what we each have and what we're each showing and sharing. So I hope, you know, that is going to be taking place a little bit more all the time, because it's important. We have to support one another. Okay, so, but yeah, that's that there, because everybody, like I look at, like I'm not on social media or any of that, or Facebook or anything like that, but I enjoy looking at, you know, I'll, you know, go on Twitter in some way, you know, and sort of like go through there and scroll through there and see what's going on and see who you know, I do, you know, I think, and what's being done out there now, it's really unbelievable. I really cannot believe how beadwork has just exploded, and just, you know, wow, you know, it's out there, and I don't think it's ever going to die. I don't think it's ever going to go away. You know, we might, you know, get up here and then maybe, but it'll always be here. It will never be, we will never be denied, you know, our culture again. We will never have to pack these pieces of beadwork and put them in a box and hide them in a drawer or hide them under the bed. It's definitely here to stay. And you know, because like during certain periods in our history, we were denied our culture. We were denied having our beadwork, something that was so much a part of us. And how we did those pieces, it was like for our families, for our, you know, our babies, our animals, even our partners. You know, we did that beadwork, and we did it with an awful lot of love. And so it should be, you know, it should be celebrated. We shouldn't have ever had to hide it or hide our identity, because beadwork is very much our identity. I know within the Métis community, and I know within the First Nations community also, it is our identity. It tells people who we are, and that we are very proud of who we are by wearing our beadwork. And whether we're men or women, I think we should, you know, be out there celebrating it. Oh, but you know, and you know, if somebody has questions along the way, you just go right, you know, ask me anything. You know, if you want me to talk about certain things, or you know, you want to ask me something about beadwork, you know, just feel free to ask me anything you want along the way. I know a lot of the stories that I do tell, that I have told, like I said, a lot of people have heard them. Talk a little bit about my mom. My mom is the type of person that, you know, she's Métis. She grew up in Lundar. She grew up in just Minnewacan. It's just outside of Lundar, and very Métis. You know, they were on, you know, they lived in on a farmer's property. They had lived in a log house that my grandfather had built there, and her and her siblings grew up there. And I was talking to a fellow that said, I was telling him about that, and, you know, naming names and this and that, and he goes, yeah. In other words, she was living on stolen land that the you know, somebody had stolen from the Métis community there. And I thought, I never even thought of it that way before, but yeah, I guess that is right, you know, and it is. But you know, like, she grew up with the music and the food and the hunting and all of that. She didn't do beadwork back then. In fact, none of my family did at that point. None of my my mom's family did beadwork. My great aunt did, her aunt did hooked rugs and braided rugs, but they never did, they didn't do beadwork. And my mom was the type of person that she, the less time she could spend in the house and doing things around the house, the much better she felt. She liked hunting and fishing and all of that, and she did that until, I would say not that many years ago as far as her life. My dad did a lot of hunting and fishing and snaring and all of that when especially when we were growing up. And there was nothing at all to, wake up in the middle of the night and you have to step over a deer to get into the bathroom. It was all there. And the music, and she jigged. She also liked jigging. So as a surprise, a few years back, it was before I turned 60, I thought, okay, and it was just a couple of months before I turned 60, I thought, I am finally going to learn how to jig. So I took classes. I went to, I took classes with Dean Davis, and I surprised her by showing her that I could actually jig. And I think of all the people I had to jig in front of, she was the one that I was most, geez, she'll tell me right away if I'm not doing it right. But I started jigging just before I turned 60, and because of COVID, we had to stop, and which was too bad. So I did that for about 4 or 5 years. I still, same with any one of you out there, if you get a chance to learn how to jig or take jigging classes, do it. You'll have so much fun doing it. And I love it. But yeah, she was champion jigger, and she, came in first place at Paw Festival and all over. So no, it was very much a Métis household. It was, yeah. And the thing is, I think, a lot of us growing up, especially my age, we were living this lifestyle, but nobody really said what it was. We didn't say, oh, well, we're living this Métis lifestyle. It was just the way you lived. It was just, and you talk about being, Métis, and, more and more all the time, it's about identity and that. But, when it comes right down to it, when I think about being Métis, and I'm very proud of my Métis culture, my Métis heritage, but it's from here. This is where I feel it. This is where it's, you can put a label on anything, but if you don't feel it here, but yeah, that's how I feel about my culture and my being Métis. And also, again, we'll get back, sort of drift out, but we'll get back to beadwork and the way I do beadwork. And I think a lot of people do it the same way. And that's the way I was taught when I was young, because we spent a lot of time too on the reserve, First Nations reserves, especially Sioux Valley. Spent a lot of time with the women there, and a lot of them did beadwork, and some of them even did floral beadwork. So I did see them doing that. And my beadwork is done the same way as the way I saw it being done. I draw out my pattern, and not necessarily do you have to tell a story in your beadwork. You can, there could be stories in your beadwork, and I do a lot of the times when I'm doing something for a customer. If I'm doing something for somebody, I will sit with them and we will talk about their life, their history, and we'll put it on their beadwork. Now, once I do that, it is just between the person I'm making it for and myself. And I will not tell their story to anybody else. That is theirs. If they want to tell it, they can tell it themselves. But that pattern will never be used again. I will never use it again, and I never will give it to anybody else to use also. But it's a journey for them also, to have their beadwork tell a story of themselves. And I just finished a project that I was doing, and it is the history of our culture, our beadwork, and it's done in almost a crest style, telling the story of our Métis culture in beadwork. And it starts off with, and of course, you know, the big rose. I always sort of feel that that big rose is the survival of the Métis. And then along the way, there's, you know, the little things that, you know, that come up, okay, and the reign of terror and the dark times that we went through, and then to come up again with that, which a lot of people think of it as our flower, the 5-petal flower. I don't know. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it isn't, but you know, it's in a lot of our beadwork. So right at the top of this is the 5-petal flower with the rose petals behind. And, you know, again, the rose is our survival, and with the 5-petal. So it's the combination of the two. So you can tell stories like that in your beadwork that way. And same with, you know, when I'm doing it for somebody else, it's like, you know, there's, like, I just finished a vest that I did for somebody with some very interesting paths that he has taken in his life, and it's in there. And so, and same with the big octopus bag at the CMHR. That one there too was a real, it was a journey, and it told a story. The beadwork told a story on there. I'm doing a piece for the WAG, which will be in, I think it's in March, it's going to happen. And that is the picture frame for this picture that I have in the background here. And it's a 5x7 picture frame. It's going to be for Hard Birth. That's the exhibit that it's going to be in. And it's that also is telling a story in that picture frame of our provisional government, our history. And you know, you'll see some of it once I get it done. I've got about 2 feet left to do on it. And but it tells the story of it, because the exhibit is a Hard Birth. So on 4 corners, there's a connection of one side to the other side, and when you bring them together, they are moss banks. So it brings in the birth of our nation. So there's 4 of those. There's a few other things in there. I did a border on, and it depends on how you look at it. It could be just a chain. It could be just a border. But you know, there's different little hidden things in there. And the red, I picked red because it's because of Red River, and because of the blood that you know, that we have, you know, that we have in us. And you know, at times it has also been part of our battles. So yeah, it is like, your beadwork can tell a story, and that's what I've done with the picture frame. And I would say probably that was probably one of the most difficult ones that I have done. Some things come very, very easy, but that picture frame has been a real struggle for me, as far as the story being told in it, and how I was going to put it in, and what I was going to be, you know, how it was going to be put together. But it'll be, you know, and it is my interpretation. It's not somebody else's, or maybe, you know, and that's the same thing with any beadwork that you do. It's your interpretation of how you know, put those stories in there. And they don't necessarily have to be in there. Yeah, and I'm sure there's stories in some of the old pieces that you see, and you know, who knows, maybe you'll be able to see them in there, you know, but maybe not, you know. It's like, but it's that person, it's the beaders, it's the person that's doing the artwork, that's doing that beadwork, that you know, that it's theirs. It is theirs. And you know, it doesn't matter, you know. Yeah, you know, you can go and you can copy things eventually, you know, though I think along the way, once you get better and better, you do more and more all the time, your beadwork will evolve and become yours. And you know, and then all of a sudden you'll see that someplace, and oh well, that was my beadwork. You know, take it both ways. It can be could be sort of like, well, you know, hey, you know, you didn't ask me to use that. And yet sometimes we have to take it as a compliment too, and go like, oh, somebody liked my piece so much they thought they'd put it in theirs. So yeah, you know, again, it's about sharing, and it's about you know, it's about, I guess, looking at other pieces of beadwork and other people's, and enjoying them too. So, but okay, what else am I going to be yakking about here? Beads. You know, I don't think beads get enough. Again, I don't think they get enough. What do you call it? Credit for what they do. And you know, we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't have beads. And beads to me are like I thought, like, especially if I'm doing an old piece, and I'm doing, and I do like using the old colors that were used, like the greasy colors and the metal beads, and you know, and using those, and some of the antique beads. And sometimes when I get antique beads, they'll be so dirty because some of them just get swept off the floor from some of the factories that have been, you know, cleared out or shut down. So they'll sweep up the beads, and sometimes they're the same color, but sometimes they're all like different colors. They're all sorted. They're all like mixed up. So a lot of the times my husband Blair, he'll sort those all out for me. Sometimes I'll get beads that I have to wash and clean before I can use them because they are old. They are old Venetian beads. The beads that were being made at a certain time period were made in Venice. And then they were brought over here. There was also factories in Holland, in Africa. So there was bead making being made, you know, being done in different parts of the world. France was another place. France closed the last factory that they had, and they were doing reproductions of some of the old colors. And I think that was in 2004. In that factory was in Lyon, France. You know, I will look and search. From the time that I started doing replica work, that was the time when I started online looking here and there and trying to find out where I could find some of these old beads. And when I did find them, I always tell this to people, if you find them and there's only just a certain amount, buy them all. Buy them all, stockpile. And I don't mean, you know, like, you know, you're not going to ever, you know, you're going to have them put away someplace where, you know, they'll never be used, or they're never going to be seen, or I think take them and be generous with them. You know, if somebody really likes those bead colors and they can't find them, that's what you do then. Then you sort of go like, okay, well, I've got that color at home, and share your beads. Yeah, especially the old ones, especially the ones that you can't get anymore. The white hearts, some of the white hearts, and these little pink beads that I have here, these little, and they're called Cheyenne pink. That's what they're called. But they're, you know, the little pink beads. They're all uneven too. They're really quite nice little beads. But yeah, I certainly buy my fair share of beads, and I have my fair share of beads sitting here. But I do like to share. I do like to share my beads, and I can always see the beads that I got on certain things that somebody else has there. It's like, oh yeah, so you use them for that, you know. So yeah, it's fun. It's a fun. That is almost like that whole bead thing. That's like I can spend days looking online for beads and finding the right colors. Oh yeah, so yeah. And this piece here, I've been working on this piece for a long time, and that's another thing is you're doing beadwork, and if you're going to be out there selling it and doing all of that, always and taking in special orders or custom orders, always make time to do something just out of the blue, just for yourself, just to sit back and just do it. You know, I find I'm always working on something, and I'm working right now on a few different pieces. Usually I don't like to do too many pieces at the same time. I like to do one and finish that and then carry on to the next one. But through COVID, I had started quite a few different little projects here and there that I always wanted to do. And it gave me a chance to really, you know, sit down and do something that I just out of the blue, like where you wake up in the morning and go like, that's what I want to do today. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. But now I got to get back to work. But I did start a little moss bag, and I started this little moss bag, and I've got the first side done, and now I got to start on the other side, and I don't know when I'll ever get it done. But anyway, it is something that I've enjoyed doing. And it's not like I don't enjoy doing the custom orders and all of that. I really enjoy that too. And you know, and meeting with people and doing all of that. And you know, when you're sitting there and you're doing your beadwork, and especially if I'm doing it for somebody, I sit there and I do think of them. I do think of that person a lot while I'm beading that piece. It's my mind doesn't go wandering too much away from them, and whether it's them and their family. But yes, I spend a lot of time thinking of them while I'm doing it, and it's usually good thoughts, because you cannot do beadwork unless you have good thoughts, and because it is kind of like meditation. I've said that before. It's but it's relaxing. I find it very relaxing to sit and do beadwork. I have my certain areas in the house that I do it in. In fact, tonight I was almost thinking of because this is sort of the computer room, and I'm sort of going into this room now too, sort of like spreading stuff around. But I do have my sewing room and my area that I have all my books and pictures of people that are important to me and other people's beadwork that I have. And but I was almost going to bring my the computer in there and have this from actually my room, my sewing room. But I sort of, well, I'll just keep it in here. Mind you, I have to clean it up first before I have to, you know, before I'm going to invite anybody in that room, because it's like, it's a little disorganized at times. Like, I'm sure some of you out there, you know, when you start your beadwork, it's like, you know, you got this and you got that, and all of a sudden it's like everything's all over the place. And that's how I usually work. I have stuff here and stuff there. I usually do a lot of my beadwork on my bed. And I have a window that looks outside, and I do most of it there, because a lot of the pieces that I do now are big pieces. So I don't like anything falling off my lap, or, you know, having to hold things up. So I do it on the bed, and nothing falls off that. So most of the time I do it there, and I can look out my window, and I have my light and everything sitting right there. And yeah, so it's really comfortable. It's really nice. Yeah. Oh.
Thank you. I mean, that was so amazing. I guess we can open it up to questions now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if you'd rather type your question into the chat, I can read it out loud.
Sure,
or want to raise your hand, that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there is a question in the chat that I'll read out loud.
Okay.
A good friend, also Michif, posted an old photo of an ancestor from well over a century ago. She was seated holding a doll in her lap. Is there a history of Métis dolls, or Cree, Métis, Anishinaabe, Métis, etc., beaded figures or soft sculptures?
Not that much, although, you know, no, okay, no. Take that back, because there is some Métis dolls down in Emerson, at the museum there, there's some little Métis dolls in there, and they are like the cutest little dolls. And they got little moccasins on and it's like, and personally, I love making little dolls, and I did a couple little dolls, and I have like a little Métis fiddle player, and I have another little Blackfoot fellow, and I actually have one of the head people at Festival. I made him. He's a little doll. But yeah, no, they did, but it was kind of, more, that was a lot of First Nations people did little dolls. And it certainly gives you a record of what was being worn at that certain time. So if that helped that person with that question. Yeah.
I think so. Yep. Sorry, I was muted there. There's another question here. How do you feel about non-Métis people doing beadwork? Is it okay to reproduce Métis beadwork on our own clothing, or should it only be worn by Métis people?
See, that's a hard question for me to answer in some ways, and yet it's easy because my dad wasn't Métis, and he wore beadwork like you wouldn't believe. It was like my mom made him a jacket, and he wore that like he was so proud of that jacket, and he really didn't care what anybody thought of what he because he was wearing that. So but he, the thing is, I think too, it's all about respect. It's all about, if somebody was to ask me, that wasn't, and they were very respectful, they knew the history and all of that, I would be fine with that, because it's like we have to share it, I think. And yeah, the more we see it out there, the better. But I don't agree with people wearing it and acting as if it's like a costume or being disrespectful about it. Yeah, they have to be knowledgeable about what they're wearing.
Great. Another question here in the chat. If beadwork designs were identifiers for families, how can you learn what your family's design might have been if your Métis history was taken from your ancestors and therefore you didn't grow up with that history?
Okay, you can go to a museum, some of the museums here. You can talk to some of the curators there, like Maureen Matthews she's very good. Same with Dr. Sherry Farrell-Rosette, and same with Catherine Penapaw. I worked with Catherine a lot through the years when she was at the Manitoba Museum. But you can find out where certain pieces came from. And if your family came from that same area, you might be able to identify whose family it came from, who did it. I would say that would probably be the only place that you would be able to find that information. Because some of these communities are a lot of them are gone, a lot of them been burnt down, so yeah, I would go there and sort of start with that and find out, okay, where did that come from? Was that, the paw, or that was, Thompson, or some of the brochet, little community, you'll find out, you'd be able to maybe narrow it down and see what, if you could identify it within your family.
Another question from the chat. Have you ever heard teachings around including a spirit bead in your work? It's something that my gram always taught me to do, but I'm not sure if it's something that was common.
It's, I wouldn't say everybody did it, but I have seen it on a lot of the old pieces. And sometimes that little spirit bead will get in there, even without you even knowing that it's there. It's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, but it is to keep you humble. It is to, and nothing is absolutely perfect. Can't be, it's like, it's to keep us, okay, just don't get a little, above, it just sort of brings you back down to earth and sort of go, okay, yeah. No, keeps us humble.
So it sort of is like not always striving for perfection. Sometimes you'll find it in there and it's just like spirit reminding you.
Yeah, that we're all, it's like even our, we're all human, even our beadwork.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, that little spirit. And I seen a piece of beadwork that this woman brought into one of the classes I was teaching, and it was a piece that was hidden away, and in her family, and she brought it out and she brought it to the class, and one thing she wanted to know was her great grandmother happy. And I said to her, I don't know beyond her beadwork whether she was happy or not, but I know when she was doing that piece of beadwork, she was happy and she was content. And the little kids in the class found the little spirit bead in there. Yeah. So, no.
Did anybody else have any questions? I think you can turn your videos on if you want and unmute yourself if you'd like to ask that way too.
Yeah.
I really liked what you said. You cannot do beadwork without good thoughts.
Yes.
Do you want to maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Okay. It's like, okay, when I start with the, talking to the person, and then I start drawing their design and getting everything ready to finally, because it's like you draw that out, you get your fabric all ready, you put that pattern on there. Then I have trays, and I take my trays over to my beads, and then I start picking out beads, and I'm going like, okay, these, that will go with that. I know this person will like those colors in there. I get that all ready, and it's like, okay, I'm set and ready to go. And it's like, oh, yeah. And it's just, and especially, most of the pieces I do, I enjoy doing them, of course, but it's like waking up in the morning knowing that, okay, I'm going to be back at it again. And it's, nothing else matters. Nothing, it's like, I will say through this COVID thing that we've had in the last, it's going on almost 2 years now. I think beadwork has really helped an awful lot of people that were struggling to be able to put that energy into their beadwork, and good energy. And because I have done beadwork when I have been a little bit stressed or upset and this and that, 9 times out of 10, I take it out the next day. You can see it. You just know that it's like, no, that was not good. Yeah. So it's really a very relaxing and very, it's a lot like meditation. Yeah. How can you not be happy with colors? Eh? Like you're looking at your beads. It's happy.
I would love to see your bead room one day. Maybe that'll be a follow-up event, tour of your beading. Does anybody else have any questions?
Would it be okay to make your own design if you don't have a family design?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Oh, that's like starting from, that's like starting from how they started. So no, perfectly okay. That is great to be able to start your own family beadwork. It's like that belongs to you, and it could belong to your family, and pass it on. Yeah.
We have a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to us about common Métis beading traits?
Oh, okay. Little buds. Let's see. I have it here. I have this. Oh, I'll bring this piece down. And this has a lot of old common styles of beadwork flowers. You can see like these little buds here, that there. Okay, there's this 5-petal flower, and that's an old style flower. Same with some of these, and this little stem here, this little curly, little vine. They're very much into Métis beadwork. And then, of course, there's the stems. The stems, and they always sort of connect from one to the next. And you'll see those little ticks all along the stems, and those are called mouse tracks. And they look like little mouse tracks in the snow. So yeah, and you'll see that on majority of Métis beadwork. But yeah, there's that rose. You'll see that it'll come up in I don't know how many different pieces of beadwork, especially Métis beadwork. And you'll see, like I said, the influence of French embroidery designs also in there too. Yeah.
Another question in the chat.
But there's also different patterns for each, okay, First Nations. They have different styles of beadwork, and you can identify groups by the style of beadwork that they do and the clothing that they would be making. Our clothing too is like a combination of the two cultures, and you get the frock coats with beadwork.
Another question in the chat here. What are your thoughts on using traditional items for modern purposes, like an octopus bag as a purse?
Oh, I'm fine with that. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah. They weren't like octopus bags, like especially within the Métis. They were used as they were called fire bags, and whatever they needed to start a fire with, they kept in those bags. And of course they rolled those fire bags in with their sashes, so it was rolled inside there too. So they carried those with them in a lot of have to carry just their, what they needed to use in pretty well in everyday life. Some of the bags, though, were actually made as giveaways or sold as trade items. You'll see a lot of those bags that in museums in Europe, and those were probably either given to somebody that was traveling across Canada, or given as a gift, or people bought them and brought them back to Europe.
Another question. You mentioned old styles of beadwork. Are there newer styles as well? And if so, how do they differ from the old styles?
Oh yeah, you can really see, for one thing, okay, first of all, you can tell by colors, the colors that people are using now. And, I always say that the colors, if those colors that we have now would have come, in 1840, we would have been using those bright colors then also. But yeah, you'll see that there's a different style of beadwork that is being done. Okay, like Lisa Shepherd is a good example of, very modern looking Métis style beadwork.
And I think this might be our last question, unless anyone else has anything that they want to quickly put in the chat here, as we're already at like 7:04, and I know that people's ability to be online is a little bit diminished these days. So the question, I've seen flower beadwork done by First Nations people claiming it to be their culture as well. I've always thought First Nations beadwork was more geometric in nature. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Okay, we may have the idea that it was geometric at the beginning, and which it was. A lot of it was because of quills, and the quills were easier to do, or they tend to go more towards geometric designs by what you were using. Like if you ever worked with quills, it's like it's not easy to do rounded like petals, and although later on they did. So a lot of the old pieces of quill work, a lot of it was geometric, but then with the with the whole idea of the Catholic Church coming in and being involved, and the French and the Scottish coming in, then there was sort of a combination of that within the First Nations community also. But I always sort of say that you talk about Métis beadwork, I'll talk about Métis beadwork. But if you want to talk about First Nations beadwork, you find a First Nations person that does beadwork and talk to them about their beadwork. Yeah, I think it's up to it. We share and we respect each other's work.
Yeah, absolutely. And like how you mentioned when you were in Sioux Valley, and the ladies there were doing flower beadwork too.
Yeah. In fact, I have patterns that were done years ago by a young girl at Sioux Valley, and some of them were doing that back. Quite a few of them were doing that back. They'd cut their patterns, they'd fold them and cut them, and then they'd open them up, and they were absolutely like flowers, and there was birds, and there was like little trees, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, and most of those were floral. Yeah, there was it was working back and forth. There was we were all sort of, and in some cases the Métis women were actually very, very skilled in needlework and beadwork, and in some cases the Hudson's Bay had Métis women do beadwork, and it was sold as First Nations beadwork. And because people that were traveling and people that were going across Canada, and during the fur trade and all of that, it was like they wanted, they wanted real Indian work. So in some cases, Métis beadwork was sold as First Nations beadwork, and put that label on there. Yeah.
Great. Are there any other questions? This has really been a super informative, excellent talk, and I really thank you so much for your time this evening.
Oh, it was a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Yeah. I just, I don't want to sort of like, some people are like, I know some of the names on here. I'm like, oh, they've heard these stories. Yeah. But no, I always enjoy, talking about beadwork, and, and whether it's First Nations or Métis or Inuit, it's like we all have our own, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to everybody for tuning in. And if you know someone that would have liked to hear this talk but wasn't able to join us this evening, it'll be posted on the Winnipeg Art Gallery's website and YouTube channel. And again, merci miigwech to Jennine for sharing her knowledge with us, and it's always a pleasure. And hopefully we'll get to meet in soon person.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. It was a real pleasure, and it was nice to get to know and finally meet Julia too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, bye.